Singapore within the hour, and his weekend abroad appears to be sending the media into a bit of a meltdown. Here to break it all down, District Media Group President and Heritage Foundation Fellow Beverly Hallberg. Beverly, good morning. Great to have you on with us.
Thank you.
All right, an important morning. Of course, he had left the G7 summit before he lands there in Singapore. So I want to get your thoughts on some images that have gone viral. First, the image of Trump and Emmanuel Macron and this handshake. There were a lot of thoughts about what was going on here, a firm grip. Here's one tweet from the managing editor at Politicus USA. Sarah Reese says, Macron owns Trump with G7 death grip handshake. Your response?
Well, let's not forget that they have what many called a bromance when Macron did come to the United States in April for the first state dinner under the Trump presidency. There was lots of handshakes and hugs. And so I think this handshake photo asks, has the relationship changed? One of the things that President Trump, I think, did want to accomplish in this meeting was come in, be strong, be very pro-America in his perspective. I think a lot of conservatives disagree with him on tariffs. But as far as what he wanted to achieve, I think he wanted to assert what he thinks the United States should be in when it comes to trade deals. And it's, you know, when you take a look at some of our allies, not all of them took kindly to that.
Yeah, we have a little bit too much fun on social media these days with these photos that come out of these important meetings. Here's another one. President Trump with Angela Merkel. Everyone has seen this picture by now. She's basically staring him down. Who knows, Beverly, what was actually going on in that moment? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and also know what Shinzo Abe was thinking in that moment. But here's a tweet from BuzzFeed News Deputy Director David Mack. Says Angela Merkel's office has released this photo taken today at the G7, which tells you a lot about how things went. What do you think?
A picture can speak 1,000 words. I think it's a very powerful image. Like you said, we don't know exactly what was happening at that time. But the body language is fascinating. You have President Trump with his arms folded. You have Angela Merkel kind of peering over him in a very ominous way. And I think this shows perfectly the tension that was at this meeting. I will say one of the most positive things that came out of it, something that I hope does happen, is that the president did say that he wants to move forward with trade agreements that are tariff-free and are free trade. That is a good thing.
So he did a Q&A at the end. This might have been one of the most entertaining parts of the summit. And he calls out a reporter, the president does, and asks him who they're reporting for. Watch this.
There was a sense that the America's closest allies were frustrated with you and that you were leaving here early to go meet for more friendlier talks with Kim Jong-un in Singapore. And I'm wondering if you view it the same way.
Who are you with, out of curiosity?
CNN.
I figured. Fake news, CNN. The worst.
Beverly?
Well, the term fake news has played well for him. He's continuing with that. So I would just hope that as he moves to North Korea, though, we can get off to calling CNN fake news for now and get to some agreements with North Korea. But it's always entertaining when he does it.
Yeah, it always is. All right, Beverly Hallberg, an important couple days to go. I'm sure there will be tons and tons of reaction still to come. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
The establishment is in a meltdown over the previous summit, the G7 summit. President Trump's criticism of allies over trade is unprecedented, they scream. He's undermining something that they call the rules-based international order. That, apparently, is all you need to say. End of discussion. Notice the only thing the foreign policy establishment cares about is style. They don't engage with the substance at all. These pompous pearl clutchers of the international elite, the world leaders with their bland communiques crafted by time-serving diplomats who think they really run the show, the arrogant and unaccountable bureaucrats running outfits like the EU and the IMF, who are basically just stooges for big business, the self-regarding after-dinner pontificators of the Washington think tank circuit, who glide smoothly over the real-world catastrophes unleashed by their ideology without ever acknowledging the slightest mistake. And, of course, the gullible commentators and journalists who unthinkingly lap up all this self-serving elitist rubbish while presenting themselves as fearless pursuers of the truth. When you see these people rounding on President Trump for daring to question their worldview, the pithy phrase of Nassim Taleb comes to mind. I, intellectual yet idiot. What is this rules-based international order that the IYIs are so attached to? Here in America and across the Western world, the rules-based international order made the rich richer and working people poorer as incomes went down and jobs went away. It ripped apart the social fabric, helping create the twin disasters of family breakdown and community disintegration. It undermined faith in government and democracy as citizens saw that it didn't matter who they voted for in actual elections. They'd end up with the same elite-serving policies regardless. The trade rules of the international order are tilted against America, allowing rampant protectionism by the EU and epic abuse by China. The rules-based international order didn't stop Russia invading Ukraine. It didn't stop Iran destabilizing the Middle East. It didn't stop the rise of al-Qaeda and ISIS. It didn't stop China getting to the brink of world domination. Oh, and it didn't stop North Korea from having nuclear weapons. Although to the bitter disappointment of the sneering elites, Donald Trump just might. When I worked as an advisor in 10 Downing Street, I wanted Prime Minister David Cameron to cancel the G8 summit when it was Britain's turn to host it. So I love seeing President Trump call time on 50 years of elitist failure. Yes, you can call it unprecedented, but doing things that are unprecedented is the very definition of Donald Trump's mandate. He was elected to change things, not keep them the same. The elitists' hate-filled hysteria shows their true colours. They love the old order because they and their rich friends benefit from it. How disgraceful that they howl in protest when President Trump tries to put working people first. Tell me what you think of the G7 elite meltdown at NextRevFNC and at Steve Hilton X. Joining me now to discuss, Fox News contributor Lisa Booth and the former US ambassador to Canada, Bruce Heyman. Mr. Heyman, I was interested that you retweeted today something from the New York Times that I think really well captures the attitude of the elite to what went down at that summit in Canada. With a petulant tweet storm from Air Force One, President Trump all but blew up the group of 7 nations that the United States has led for more than 4 decades and essentially declared open political war on America's closest neighbor. This is so over the top, this reaction. It seems to me that what you're experiencing, you and those who have that view, is just shock at the democratic process finally working. That for years and years and years, people vote in elections, nothing really changes. In 2016, someone's elected who promises to change things on trade and tariffs and all the rest of it, and you can't quite believe that he's actually doing it.
Oh, so here's the reality here, and the thing that I know so well. United States and Canada have no better relationship than any 2 countries in the world. And when we talk about trade, $680 billion in goods and services in the U.S. has a surplus in trade. This is our best friend. This is our best ally. And so to treat Canada in the way that we've been treating them, I think is unfair and inappropriate. That being said, I think calmer voices need to come in, and we need to find a path to solution. But don't get me wrong. This is about jobs for the middle class. Millions of U.S. jobs, middle class, good-paying jobs, are due to our relationship with Canada. And so I think that we have misplaced this. And I hear you. Look, I think there's a lot of excitement around populism, and you can clearly see that around the world in terms of voting and outcomes. But I think sometimes we put a gun to our head and start clicking the trigger, especially as it comes to Canada. I think we're making a huge error here, sir.
But why do you think that it's not okay for the president to just simply move forward on the things he was elected to do, and specifically to put the American worker first? There's one particular thing. I mean, everyone is going on about how amazing Canada is and Trudeau's this great saint. What's going? I mean, what do you think of what's going on right now in the NAFTA negotiations over this? The investor-state dispute settlement, for example? Just one example of this dispute.
Yeah. Well, look. That we need to have a dispute settlement of some type.
But let's
so
just
if we
explain,
disagree with each other, we need to.
Let's just explain to the audience what's going on here, which is that President Trump is trying to take out of NAFTA a provision that means that multinational corporations can get any disputes with a government dealt with by a bunch of bureaucrats, so that a foreign company that operates in America is subject to American courts. And it's Trudeau who's siding with big business against the democratic voice of a sovereign nation. Why is the elite defending that?
I'm not getting involved. Look, I'm not the trade negotiator here between our 2 countries today. But I can tell you this. This agreement has produced a lot of middle-class jobs. 35 U.S. states, their #1 export market is to Canada. and we have a very balanced trade. In agriculture, the U.S. has a surplus in agriculture with Canada.
Okay.
In energy,
I don't want to get bogged down. I don't want to get bogged down. I'm sorry to cut you, because we've rehearsed all those. I'm making a general point here, Lisa, about the fact that just the very notion of challenging this stuff is seen as just completely beyond the pale. How dare he even argue with our allies?
Well, were they paying attention to the 2016 election? Because, as you mentioned, President Trump does feel like he had a mandate. Look, his election and it was a direct response to what we saw from President Obama, where Americans felt like we were weak on the world stage. And they elected someone who had a position of strength, who said that I'm going to go in, I'm going to shake things up, I'm going to change sort of the global, status quo that we've been seeing that Americans were dissatisfied with. And look, if you're President Trump and your perspective is the fact that the NAFTA deal is weak, how else do you extract extractions or in concessions without utilizing some sort of leverage? And I think that's where the aluminum and steel tariffs come into play, is President Trump trying to use that as leverage, against Canada and Mexico in these negotiations. Also, President Trump, look, he's already done everything he said he was going to do. He pulled out of the Iran deal. You look at the Paris Climate Accord, pulling out of that as well, basically sending a very strong message to the rest of the world that, if you're not with us on some of these issues, we're going to go it alone.
Right. Well, I agree with that very much. Ambassador, look, I hate to sort of, take a shot at your, I guess, former profession, but, I mean, isn't it also good news that finally, thanks to President Trump, we're sort of pulling the veil from this ridiculous game of diplomacy that goes on, where these diplomats craft these communiques that sort of try and accommodate everyone's view, they cover up the reality, but actually, behind the scenes, everyone's fighting and disagreeing. He's just putting that out in the open. It's just transparent, isn't it? It's better than diplomacy.
Look, I'm a pretty frank person and very outspoken. I think the Canadians would tell you that. And I made no bones about bringing up issues that were of concern to the United States. But at the end of the day, we have no better friend in the world. And when we sit down and we're just talking about trade and dollars and cents, you're missing the point of how important this relationship has been to the United States. They have been there for us at every twist and turn in our deep history with them, 150 years. They were the ones who helped ferret our diplomats out of Iran when the Ayatollah came in and took over. They were the ones who were with us at 9/11.
Oh, right. Look,
not only
he's
with
not
us.
trying to invade Canada. He's not trying to do that. They're still friends. He's just trying to get a fair deal for America. Lisa, last word to you.
I think you're right. Look, people weigh... They blow up everything with President Trump. The economy was supposed to crash under President Trump. That has not happened. With fire and fury, we're on the brink of World War III. That hasn't happened. So I think President Trump has earned some latitude in the sense where we've seen these overreactions, and they end up really not meeting, that place where everyone's overreacting. It ends up not being bad at all, and ultimately tends to work in President Trump's favor. So who knows? It's too early to precisely see where these trade negotiations are going to go, but I think he's earned some latitude.
Exactly, and I just think that it's ridiculous when all these experts just say, well, you can't say these things. It's just not on. You have to just follow the script that's been there. The script hasn't worked.
Well, and too, Steve, I think when people see that photo of other world leaders and President Trump staring each other down, they see leadership. They see a position of strength, which is what we hadn't seen and haven't seen or didn't see under President Obama. And again, I really think President Trump's election was a response to that weakness from President Obama. They wanted America to be strong again. They wanted America to assert itself again. And President Trump is certainly doing that. Whether you like it or not, he's doing it.
That's right. And, you're exactly right. We'll see the results. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. We appreciate that.
Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America.